Welcome to this week's Head to Toe Healing Live. Dr. Kevin Reese created Head to Toe Healing, and in our membership, he's incorporated 3 macro methods, giving the body the right conditions it needs so it can start healing itself the way it was designed to. These 3 methods are the musculoskeletal system, nutrition, and mindfulness. Today on the call with me, I have Coach Ryan, Coach Sean, and Coach Gingy. They're 3 of our specialists that are in the Head to Toe Healing membership and help people along their way in their journey for healing. My name is Coach Karen, and I want to welcome you today. Today, we are going to be talking about the topic of hypertension. But before we get into that, please, if you have any comments or questions, please drop them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer the questions for you. But I wanted to pop over to Coach Ryan first. And Ryan, would you just define for us and our group that's joining us today or listening in a replay, what is hypertension and why should somebody be concerned about that?
Well, hypertension is high blood pressure, and people should be concerned because they call it the silent killer, and because there really isn't any other overt symptoms other than your blood pressure being high, but you don't typically feel it or get any other direct symptoms caused by that. In fact, I would say that the hypertension itself is a result. It's a symptom, in most cases, of an overall metabolic problem. So, we talk a lot about metabolism. I'm sure we can get back into it later, but especially when people have blood sugar problems, obviously it's very common for them to come in also with blood fat problems, so high cholesterol and high blood pressure. And to me, it just means that their metabolism is out of whack. But there are other possibilities for causing it as well, which we can circle back to.
Sounds like a good plan. Coach Sean, do you know how would posture contribute to hypertension? Do you have any insights on that at all?
Yeah, so it's a mixture of poor circulation, poor oxygen, and basically a chronic dysfunction going on in the body. There's a lot of kinks in the hoses in multiple places, and so the heart has to work overtime to, increase pressure to get the oxygen or get the nutrients flowing in that part of the body. Wherever the dysfunction is, it's just creating a bunch of kinks in the hose, and so when you straighten out the hose, the blood pressure will regulate. But there's numerous amounts of high blood pressure situations that were resolved when their posture started to get back into alignment. So it's definitely a telling sign there.
Thank you. Coach Gingy, there's so much external stress in the world today. How does stress affect hypertension?
I'd say external and internal stress. A lot of people are dealing with things that are like, well, my job is stressful or my relationship is stressful, but really that stress is self-induced internally. The thing that people need to be mindful of is in regards to hypertension and high blood pressure and these types of issues is that the thing that can easily cause blood pressure to rise is the muscles around the arteries to tighten. And if they're tight, it's like squeezing a hose. What happens if you put your thumb over the end of a hose? The pressure in the line goes up. So this is going to create an increase in blood pressure. And like Ryan was saying, this is a underlying, a symptom of a bigger underlying problem. And like Sean said, this is kinks in the hose. So you want to be mindful of your posture, how you're sitting, how you're standing, how you're walking, because there are going to be certain patterns in your life that are contributing to hypertension. And in the same way, you want to be considering what type of mental and emotional patterns you have that continue to trigger tension in the body and stress. Like for example, inflammation is one of the underlying root issues of hypertension, because when things are inflamed, hoses are going to get kinked, underlying metabolic problems happen, and blood pressure is going to come rising up. If that's happening, that can easily happen from stress, from stress hormones that get created, from digestion having issues. I mean, there's a whole host of things that can cause the problem that we're talking about here, and you want to be mindful of all the things in your lifestyle that are contributing to it: the problematic foods, the posture, nutrition, stress, anxiety, fear, anger. All of these things, they all contribute to the same one big symptom we're calling hypertension.
Thank you for that. Ryan, I wanted to pop over to you again. You were talking about it's the silent killer. There's really not a lot of indications that hypertension's happening. Um, are there any sort of, well, warning signals, or does it just kind of come out of the blue for people?
Oh, like I said, with the lack of symptoms, there isn't much of a warning signal other than you just taking your blood pressure and finding it to be high. But almost every single case, there is other obvious signs of a metabolic problem, right? Maybe it's overweight, maybe it's an appetite problem, lack of appetite or too much appetite, blood sugar, as mentioned, blood cholesterol, other problems in the metabolic category, kidney dysfunction, frequent urination. Those are the types of things that we would be looking out for. But I wouldn't use that as a measure of, if you're at risk for hypertension. I would just say, okay, well, the metabolism's either healthy or it's not. So we're going to look at all these metabolic markers. And if it's not, we're going to work on it. Using all 90 essential nutrients as we do, boosting some of them if needed for specific symptom categories. Getting them off of the bad foods would be particularly important in the case of blood pressure because you can have an immediate reaction to foods. And this is actually one of the ways that we determine if you're sensitive to foods. Now, you could do it by measuring your blood pressure. So if you eat something that you're allergic to, not anaphylactic allergy, I would call it a sensitivity. First of all, your heart rate should increase, which is what we usually measure. We call it a pulse test, measure the pulse, see if the pulse goes up after you eat a certain food. And typically we start with people's favorite foods. We've mentioned that before because usually it's the favorite food that is the problem for them. But the blood pressure can go up too at the same time. It's just not as convenient to measure the blood pressure, but you could do it either way. This is a proper elimination diet here, right? You stop eating for at least 24 hours, everything, and reintroduce the top suspects one at a time. Measure the pulse before and after, half an hour after, an hour after. Just do it the same way each time. And you can do that with blood pressure too, either pulse or blood pressure. And that will give you a pretty solid indication that your body does not like that food, at least right now. Maybe we have to repair the digestive system so that they can tolerate that food again. But this could be any food. Could be banana, could be chicken, it could be rice, any food. And I think this is a very important thing for anybody to do to determine if they have any food sensitivities and start working on their guts to see if we can get rid of those sensitivities.
Would that also play the same kind of scenario if somebody was to test their blood pressure before and after alcohol or other beverages? Because there's so many convenient beverages on the marketplace today. What do you think about those?
Yeah, good point in bringing up beverages because I usually don't do that enough. We talk about the bad foods, and I've mentioned it before here on these lives that a lot of people on paper, their diet doesn't seem too bad until you examine the drinks. The drinks is where the bulk of a lot of people's calories sneak in, sugar and just additives, caramel flavor and strawberry flavor, and these types of things can be really, really problematic. So yeah, absolutely examining the drinks too, because they commonly have a lot of additives that, a normal health conscious person wouldn't dare eat or buy, but it's in that drink that they just get now and then or something like that. Or maybe even their morning latte or whatever, pumpkin spice, whatever those flavoring agents are, they're usually a problem.
Well, and it seems like today corn is in so many things too, corn syrup flavorings, and it's hidden in a lot of condiments as well. And I know several people that have sensitivities to corn. What's your thought on that?
One of the most common allergens, yeah. And I guess we don't talk about it enough either. It's not on our outright bad list because it doesn't bother everyone, but it bothers a heck of a lot of people. Remember that corn is a grain, and grains in general are the most problematic type of foods. It's not just the gluten grains, it's all grains could potentially bother people, especially once they already have a messed up digestion system or a messed up metabolism. Then the grains start to become, hugely inflammatory. And again, this could even be gluten-free grains. We usually just start with the basics, start with getting off of the gluten, the wheat, barley, rye, and oats primarily. But there are quite a few people who need to get rid of all grains, at least temporarily, in order to heal their digestive system. And corn is one of them. And yeah, we don't talk about corn enough, but we should, because you're right. It has snuck into many, many different things, including drinks, high fructose corn syrup.
Well, and us just talking about this, it reminds me of soy too. It seems like so many people are very sensitive to soy products too. What's your thought on that?
Same thing. Very common allergen.
Okay. So with this, when people are ingesting the poor four foods, the grains, corn, soy, other additives that may be hiding in the convenience drinks, all of these are factors that are leading to disease in their body and getting it into a situation where they're not utilizing, well, they're not getting their body in the right condition where it can turn things around, which is crazy because so many people that come to us, they're really in a state of disease, they're in a state of lack of nutrition, they're hurting, they're in pain every single day. It's really hard to talk to them sometimes because they're not sure what they're doing wrong. So I really am thankful that we have an opportunity to have this dialogue each week and let people know and have them have an opportunity to ask questions. So I wanted to loop back with Coach Sean for a minute. And a lot of times when people come to us, whether they hop on a call with us or they get into our membership after they've had an opportunity to really chat with this and find out if head to toe healing is for them, they're really a little bit confused what posture alignment therapy is and why is that a part of the head to toe healing process? So would you explain that a little bit more, why that modality is so effective, Coach Sean?
Yeah, so with convenience and efficacy that happens, when humans evolve technologically, we've began to sit. We've began to become more inactive. A lot of things are done for us or done for us, or we can do a lot of things just from the comfort of our own home on our phone or on a computer. And so that led to us not moving as much. And throughout human history, we've been moving. Our bodies adapted to move. We're not always supposed to just be lying around and resting. Moving is what helps stimulate and pull the body back together or realign the body. And so when we started having a more sedentary lifestyle, that leads to positions that our body have not evolved or adjusted to being in for prolonged amounts of time. And so that leads to slouching posture or just a lot of posture dysfunctions that then start to affect whatever area the dysfunction is. And so, like people that have forward head, we usually notice they have some type of thyroid issue or what Dr. Reese would call above the head symptoms. So they get vertigo, tinnitus, um, uh, uh, migraines. It's just so many symptoms that can link from that. Even like allergies can be exacerbated from that. And I've noticed that, a hunchback, people have issues with their heart. Or if it's somewhere located in the lower back, it's a digestive issue or a reproductive issue. And so, with that being said, it's important to take this into account because no matter how much nutrients you're pushing through the blood, if the blood can't get to the area that it needs to get to, or the oxygen can't get to the organ or tissue that it needs to get to, then it's not going to be of any use to the body. And so you have to clear out the kinks in the hose and you have to get your body moving to correct these dysfunctions because, like in nature, anything that you don't use, you will lose. Nature will integrate it out. And so if you're not using your muscles, even the tiny muscles, not just the macro muscles, if you're not using the muscles as they need to be used, then there's going to be problems later down the line. I always ask people, just ask yourself, when is the last time I actually reached up to grab something? When is the last time I turned around and reached behind me to grab something or climbed up on top of something or ran up some stairs? Really think about that thing and say, wow, like it's been about a week since I've done something like that, or I don't remember the last time I've done that. And so we're just exposing you to more of those movements to help the body get back into alignment and get back into how it is supposed to move. Of course, if you break something, rest. But if you're having pain, it's not always, oh, I need to rest. It's, oh, my body's not moving correctly and I need to fix that before it develops into a more severe chronic issue.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that you explained that a little bit more about the kinks in the hose. You had mentioned that earlier, and sometimes people haven't been watching us for a while, and I appreciate the clarity. So basically, the oxygen, the nutrients can get flowing through the body better with posture therapy. So that way, there's no impingements, no kinks in the hose.
Yeah, and there's also a deep connection, not only with nutrition, but with mindfulness as well. Genji touched on it a bit, but um, another reason that you could be having high blood pressure is you're just constantly tense. You have chronic tenseness throughout the body. You're stressed about something. And I know when people go into our classes, it's always after the class. They're saying like, wow, I never knew how much I forgot how to breathe until you told me that I need to breathe, or how much I was just tensing up random muscles that weren't a part of the exercise just because I was going through stress. So we have like, uh, uh, what is it called? Starts with a T, like tails, or we do little habits when we stress. And so some people, it may be tensing up their shoulders. Some people, they biting their lip, or, uh, you know, grinding on their jaw,
Are you talking
tapping
about
their leg.
the ticks that people have sometimes?
Ticks, exactly, ticks. And that can evolve into like worse habits, to where you're causing an imbalance in your body because you're always stressed. And so you're just doing something that you're not realizing that you're doing, or you're stressing out even when you don't realize you're stressing out. Some people are like, how can I have chronic stress? I don't feel like I'm stressed out. But they don't feel it because they don't realize it. Then they're not going inside and breaching into that kinesthetic awareness. And so that's a part of mindfulness. And so I'm just saying that everything is connected. Just like mindfulness has a grasp in everything, posture has a grasp in everything. So does nutrition. Everything is like reaching onto everything. And so it's all connected.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love how it's all integrated together because I've done many different nutrition programs, fitness programs, but I'd never put the mindfulness factor into it. And I hadn't put the posture aspect into it too. But those three together work amazingly well. And that's why we have so many people turning their bodies around, reversing chronic health conditions, getting off of medications, and getting to a point where they're pain-free. It's incredible. Coach Gingy, how about you? It seems like, again, when I talk to people, a lot of times they're like, what do you mean the mindfulness part of your program? And they're a little bit baffled. How does the mind-body connection interplay with head to toe healing?
It's funny, I get that question a lot. They're like, okay, well, what does my mind have to do with my high blood pressure? What does my mind have to do with my, my swollen ankles or something? And I'm like, well, how did you get your way into this situation in the first place? Like, you had to think about something first. You had to make a decision. You had to make a commitment. You had to take action. Action always follows what you think. And I love the way that Dr. Reese describes the mind-body connection. He's like, you have this onboard computer inside your skull, and it's hardwired to the rest of the body through the nervous system. So, of course, this computer is going to control all of the biological things that are going on in the body. So, of course, what you think and how you feel and what you believe and all of these mental aspects, they're going to impact downstream what the nervous system is connected to. So you could, for example, worry, and that worry can show up in the body as raising your blood pressure. Like, we keep going back to that example. Um, but let's make it a little bit more relatable. Um, there's a lot of, okay, let's put it this way. There's a lot of conflict around what types of information people should believe that they find on the internet. And one of the ways that people decipher whether or not the information is trustworthy or believable is if it is backed up by independent, peer-reviewed, double-blind, triple-blind studies. Why? because everybody knows this thing called the placebo effect. And you can't escape the placebo effect. You have to incorporate it into your analytics in order to understand the viability or the actual results of your test. So we actually have to work into our equations and compensate for and account for how the mind interrupts and interferes with whatever our research is. So, say you're doing research on a specific disease. Okay, we found that this medication helps this disease by 80%. That's great. That's the efficacy rating. Now you go test that over here and they get 60%. Well, why? What happened with these different people? And so they have to start then doing blind studies. Well, they don't know that this is what the test is for. Because if they knew, it changes the results of the test. This is the way the placebo effect works. Like they could literally, I was reading a study on this. They gave men who have male pattern baldness, they gave them a sugar pill and said, this is going to grow your hair back. And they gave it to them, and like 40% of the men in that control group grew some hair back. Literally, their belief that the sugar pill was going to grow their hair made their hair grow. And it was just a sugar pill. But now there's a thing called the nocebo effect, which is a little less commonly known, but it's still something they have to mitigate in studies. And the nocebo effect is when they gave men with a full head of hair a pill, a sugar pill, and said, this is going to make your hair fall out, but we're hoping it's going to help with your other conditions. And they took the pill and their hair fell out, literally. Like 40% of them, same thing. So you have to account for what people believe about what's going on and how it impacts the body in order to know how effective different healing modalities or approaches are going to be. And I find this, as the mindfulness coach in the program, I find this especially problematic when people go and engage with medical doctors. And the first thing the doctor says is, here's your diagnosis. Believe that you have this problem. Okay, now here's your prognosis. You're going to live for 6 more months. And like they tell people as if they know, creating a belief in their mind, which, as we know by evidence based off the placebo and the nocebo effects and trials and tests and everything, that is going to impact the way that their healing process is going to work out. And I'm like, that's the number one most destructive thing that any doctor can do, is tell you you're not going to get better, because it will create 40% more likelihood that that is actually what happens. They should be telling people, we'll do everything we can, or there's always a possibility if you're still breathing, and be optimistic in what they tell people, because just based off of pure scientific data, that is going to make a massive difference, especially right at the beginning. Like if I give you a sugar pill and say this is going to work, it is going to have an impact just because you believe it to be so, or vice versa.
It's so true. And I love that fact that Dr. Reese always says, if you weren't born with it, you don't own it. And it gives so much hope for people that are facing chronic illnesses or just aches and pains they didn't have when they were younger. Once the body has the right conditions to heal itself, it can do wonderful things. And if you're new to our Head to Toe Healing Live, Dr. Reese's Head to Toe Healing Live, of course, he's not on here. Our coaches are. They're interacting with people in the membership every single day. It's absolutely fantastic. If you're curious about what we do and if it's for you, you might want to go to drkevinreese.com and get a hold of this book, the red book, and the green book, and start there to find out what head to toe healing is and to see if it's something that you might want to try to get your body in a condition where it can start turning around and healing itself. But let's get to some of our questions and comments. Eric's here. I'm going to direct this over to Ryan. He says, sometimes people need more potassium for hypertension. Coach Ryan, is that true? Is there other things they can do besides potassium? I know that I have elderly parents and other aunts and uncles that are taking potassium on a regular basis, but is that the cure-all?
Well, there's no such thing as a cure-all in nutrition in general. Potassium is one of the most important nutrients for blood pressure, yes. And in fact, this ties into something else I wanted to bring up. We've spoken about it here before, but the mainstream medical world still believes that salt causes high blood pressure, and so they tell you to restrict your salt. Well, They also have this concept of salt sensitivity, people who are sensitive to salt or abnormally sensitive to salt. And so those are the people that can have even a little bit of salt and their blood pressure goes up immediately. Well, it's been known in animal industries and, in human alternative nutrition, I guess, for like 50 years, that's really just a calcium and potassium deficiency. If they're salt sensitive, it's a calcium and potassium deficiency. So when you fill those in, then they're no longer salt sensitive. And it doesn't usually take that long either. But since we're talking about blood pressure, and since salt is the most common and most egregious myth about it, I think we should take a moment to discuss this a little bit. But let me just, fully answer your question. Yes, potassium is extremely important. The average person does get too much salt and not enough potassium, but it's not really too much salt by itself. It's just more salt than potassium. You need more potassium. And the average person, especially if they're not, or especially if they're eating processed foods, they're not eating a whole food diet that has a lot of, especially vegetables in it, fruit and vegetables, they're not going to be getting enough potassium. So that can cause them to be salt sensitive, and therefore you can get the blood pressure being raised by salt. But again, it's not the salt, it's the potassium deficiency. But there have been several very large studies that have, they should have put this whole thing to bed about salt, including a major study in 2011 published in JAMA. There's almost 4,000 participants here, and they found that the less sodium a person consumed, the higher his or her risk from death from strokes and heart attacks. And of course, they say that the hypertension, it puts you at risk for cardiovascular disease, right? So the hypertension by itself doesn't produce any symptoms, but we take that as a measure of risk for cardiovascular disease. So in this study, which was widely published, by the way, they did find that the least salt consumed, the more heart attacks, more strokes, more death from cardiovascular disease. So we do need salt to function properly. I just really wanted to hammer that in. There was also a major review done by the Cochrane Collaboration. They're a nonprofit in Denmark. They're known for taking lots of other good studies and putting them together and coming up with conclusions from that. And they concluded there at the Cochrane Institute that, the Cochrane Collaboration, that there was no strong evidence of benefit from salt restriction, and that this restriction increased the risk of death in people with congestive heart failures. Once again, that was also in 2011. And back in 1988, there was more than 10,000 people in 32 countries. This was called the InterSalt study, all one word, InterSalt. That conclusion was salt has only a small importance in hypertension. Another big one here. Yeah, I'm sorry, actually, that was the same study from 2011, also concluding that, just another way of looking at it, concluding that less salt equals more heart disease. And so, yeah, there are other things to touch on here, but as long as you brought up potassium, I wanted to bring up that salt thing, that salt and potassium, or sodium and potassium, have a very special relationship. They need to be in proportion so that they can let things in and out of the cell properly. And if either one of those is too much or too little, that's really screwed up. So your basic cellular metabolism is also screwed up at that point, and you're going to get symptoms all throughout the body, not just in blood pressure. Hence why many of these nutrient deficiencies show up all throughout the metabolic syndrome, right? This potassium will come up with blood sugar and blood cholesterol and obesity as well, right? There'll be studies saying, more potassium equals less obesity, and that has to do at the core with this relationship between sodium and potassium.
Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, on my list of questions I was going to ask you was, I found a little snippet online today, and it was saying, according to the WHO, the 5 tips to prevent high blood pressure were: 1, reducing salt to less than 5 grams daily; 2, eating fruits and vegetables daily, regularly; avoiding saturated fats and trans fats; avoiding tobacco and alcohol; and being active. But it sounds like there's much more to it than those 5 tips from what you've been sharing.
Yeah.
All right. We've got a lot of questions that have come in. I'm just going to go back up to my notes here and see. One of the individuals watching right now is saying, so what is the good food to eat? Now I'm so confused because we talked about some bad foods not to eat. What are some good foods that you could share, Ryan?
All vegetables, all fruits, meat. I mean, real foods. right? Grains are really the most problematic one, but grains are not real food. You can't eat a grain unless you cook it and process it, right? So we can turn it into being edible, but it's not edible automatically. Whereas you can eat raw vegetables, you can eat raw meat, you can eat raw eggs, you can eat raw fruit, all that stuff. So, we actually have a pretty short list of bad foods. So people panic about, what do I eat? I mean, there's thousands of different options. It's just you avoid processed foods, and you're going to be better off if you get rid of grains completely, at least for now, right? Because that'll automatically remove all the gluten grains. And if you have a problem with one of the non-gluten grains like sorghum or something, it won't matter for now because you've removed all of that stuff. So I'm just saying, the reason I'm saying all grains is because very commonly people go gluten-free and they'll go and they'll buy gluten-free cookies at the grocery store, gluten-free breads or something like that. And invariably they have just a bunch of other grains that tend to also have proteins that are very similar to gluten, even though it's not exactly gluten. And if you are already inflamed and your guts are already messed up, you're probably going to have a hard time with all grains. All right, this is how people can even have a problem with rice. Right? Rice itself is not categorically bad. Obviously, most of the world actually lives on rice, and most of them do pretty well. Right? These rice consuming countries do a lot better than America. They're the top longevity countries. They still have their own problems, but nonetheless, just saying, don't panic, because you can probably go back to grains, at least some of them, not the gluten grains. And then what else are we avoiding? The poor four foods is gluten, oil, fried, and fake. Yeah, oil is oxidized if it's industrially made. If you make your own oil and consume it quickly, I don't have a problem, but nobody's doing that. Deep fried food is always a problem, even if the oil is perfect to begin with. If it was done on an incredibly rare occasion, that wouldn't be a big deal, but it's part of people's regular diets. And the last of the poor four foods is fake foods. And you would think that would need very little explanation. Avoid fake foods, avoid processed foods, things in packages, things in bags and boxes. Because they're highly processed, even if they're marketed as health foods. Most of the health food industry is a complete gimmick. It's a complete scam, right? So you're still eating junk foods, even if it's labeled gluten-free or something. If it comes in a package, it's junk. And if it's part of your regular diet, it's going to contribute to metabolic dysfunction and damage within the body. And that damage happens in the veins. When the veins get hard or they thicken up with plaque, then that can also cause high blood pressure. Right? We've talked about atherosclerosis at length on one of our previous lives here, so I'm not going to go all the way into that, but just saying that processed foods is the primary cause of that. So if people are complaining, what do I eat? You have a whole world full of real food, tons of real food. We're not limiting any vegetables, any fruit. You can have any meat you want. You could use spices and herbs. And when your guts are working correctly, you can use some grains too.
That's awesome. It's best to just keep it simple, one food ingredients, and then combine them together to make a wonderful meal.
And by the way, I should mention, I guess I usually forget to mention, you can have nuts, you can have beans. I'm not a huge fan of beans, but you can have beans and lentils and stuff like that. Like, there's very little foods that we're actually taking away.
Absolutely. It's going back to the basics is what it is. Instead of shopping on all those center aisles of the supermarket, going around the perimeter.
We all paused here.
I'm here.
I think we lost Karen for a second, but it looks like she's back.
Yeah, I think my internet went out for a minute. So Ryan, we have a question here for you. Deb's asking, what's the best natural way to lower cholesterol?
Well, if Deb is a member, then we would be going through step by step. First, making sure the digestion is working correctly. I don't think she is a member because I don't recognize her name. We have several Debs in the membership, though. Yeah, we'd start with digestion, and we'd get them all 90 essential nutrients, and be looking at other symptoms of metabolic dysfunction. Is it blood sugar? Is it a thyroid problem? Then I would decide, do we need to support that extra? But normally the cholesterol should start coming down pretty quickly within the membership and or within the program. And we just change as needed. I can't give step-by-step instructions here to the public, by the way. It's too complicated, and it's not right to do that, right? We take everyone on a case-by-case basis. We do have things standardized as much as we can, but my whole job in there is to change things when needed. And it happens a lot. It happens a lot. Maybe it won't happen to you. Maybe you'll go absolutely swimmingly on the normal standardized program, digestion, blood sugar, probably start coming down on its own. But if not, this is why we have a membership. We're here to guide you and steer you if needed, and change things if needed, take things away, add things. There's literally thousands of different options on how we can combine the nutrients and different herbal products and stuff that we could use if we need to, because there's a ton of different herbs and mega doses of certain nutrients that could be very, very useful if somebody is having a difficult time lowering their cholesterol, which is not normally the case. Most people, cholesterol is pretty easy to lower.
Thank you for that. I wanted to pop over to Coach Sean. In speaking to a lot of people on the phones when they call in to get more information about the Head to Toe Healing membership, a lot of times they have pinched nerves and they're not sure what to do. How does posture help support their body in a better way so that way that can be relieved, that pain?
Yeah, so I think that having a pinched nerve or compressed nerve anywhere in the body is like one of the most problematic issues that you can have, because it's technically like you're blacking out. You're having a blackout in specific sections of your body, where the organs can't communicate, and or the brain can't communicate with the organs, something along those lines, and it can get really bad. But essentially, what is happening there? It's just a posture dysfunction. See, the nerves are running all throughout your body, so any type of kink in the hose can also cause some type of compression in your nerves, because if it's not aligned correctly, if the bone is not aligned correctly, or if the muscle is pressing up against the nerve, they're just innocent bystanders at that point. So that's when, even more so, having the correct alignment in your body would matter. One thing that comes to mind is like AFib, where you're getting like heart palpitations and stuff like that. Well, look at what is happening in your posture, and you'll see that there's probably something going on with the spine. There's probably something going on in that area, that upper back area or lower back area, that is contributing to a nerve being pinched and thus causing some type of disruption in the heart. Or it can go up to the head, people getting chronic migraines. Or uh, I know people can get like stroke like symptoms, where if they just have cervical flexion, which is forward head, their head is forward and it's compressing all the nerves and blood vessels and lymphatic nodes, not lymphatic, uh, lymphatic drain. I can't think right now.
Stagnation?
Well,
Stagnation,
just like
maybe?
whatever runs like through wherever, it's causing lymphatic stagnation. And Basically just that little area, just that head forward movement can cause like numbness in the body, like to where you feel like you can't move, you can't do anything, and it's just a simple pinched nerve. So, yeah, to answer, pinched nerves is something that we could definitely specialize in helping to address. But yes, it should be absolutely addressed as quick as possible, because they get pretty bad. Oftentimes, when it's already, you're getting pins and needles, and like you can't feel anything. Sometimes certain parts of the day, carpal tunnel is another thing. You can't feel your hand, or it feels sluggish. You feel a lot of fatigue in certain areas of the body, or just on one side of your body. That's a very telling sign that it's already getting into a severe and critical stage.
All right. Sorry about that. I think I'm having major internet issues today. My whole Zoom just dropped. So I'm back. Thanks so much for that information, Coach Sean. Ryan, we had a question for you. We have somebody on here that's asking, what is a good cholesterol level? Would you please address that, please?
Well, for many years, we've said that the ideal level is between 220 and 270, but I've been reevaluating that in recent years, noticing that most people on the program, including myself, tend to stay around 200 or less than 200. Me, myself, I sit around 190. And it seems to be healthy given that the people I'm looking at, including myself, don't have any other symptoms. So, they have found in certain studies that people with the highest cholesterol live the longest and stuff like that. But still, I take elevated cholesterol as a sign of metabolic dysfunction. And I'm not going to panic if it's over 200 and you got to get on statin drugs and stuff like that. It's insane. But I am going to look at it closer, so if they're at 230, 250, 270, whatever, once again, I'm not going to panic. It's not an emergency to me, but I'm still going to take that as a sign that their metabolism isn't working 100% optimally, and it should come down as we work on their other symptoms. Very, very rarely do we see somebody with no symptoms and their cholesterol is over 220. In some studies, by the way, it's been right around 220 is their perfect mark, they say.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
But it's going to vary a little bit for each person. Like it's just there's no exact benchmark because you and I are metabolically different, and as we age, it's going to be a little bit different. And for where I'm at in my life with my level of activity and what I eat, that's why my cholesterol is stable. But if I change that, it could go up, and that might not be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Now you brought up the word statin drugs. With statin drugs and PPIs, would you talk about those a little bit more? Because there may be people that are just tuning in for the first time. And if they have high cholesterol, maybe they think that's a good idea. Would you address that a little bit more?
Well, to me, statin drugs are one of the two worst drugs, and the other one is the proton pump inhibitors or any drug that lowers stomach acid. And what they should know is if you're on either of those two drugs, you're probably not going to get any better no matter what you do. I would say, quite frankly, don't waste your time. Don't waste your time, especially with the proton pump inhibitors, because you need strong stomach acid to digest foods properly, and you need them to absorb. You need strong stomach acid to absorb many nutrients properly. And statin drugs affect the liver. They mess with the liver and the way that it metabolizes fats. Obviously, cholesterol is a fat. The cholesterol is made in almost every cell in the body, or at least every cell has the ability to make it, but most of it is made in the liver. So the statin drugs basically attack the liver, suppress the liver. And that doesn't just mess with cholesterol. And cholesterol is an essential nutrient, right? If there's high cholesterol, it's there for a reason. It may just be trying to put out inflammation because cholesterol is an alkaline substance that can quell the inflammation. Same with high B12 and other things that the liver releases. I would say, well, why is it high? Probably to bring down inflammation. The liver is doing that for a reason. But if you mess with the liver or its ability to utilize fats, what statin drugs do, it doesn't just lower cholesterol. It also screws up your vitamin D metabolism. Sometimes it makes it too low. Sometimes it makes it too high. And it messes with a bunch of other nutrients as well, just particularly the fatty nutrients. So that's vitamins D, E, A, and K, and any nutrients that have a fat relationship like selenium, zinc, CoQ10, many antioxidants in foods like turmeric and stuff. These are basically fat soluble or fat loving lipophilic. So when you mess with the fat metabolism, you're messing with a huge swath of nutrients. And it's like trying to bake a cake without the eggs and the sugar. It's just not going to be a cake. You can't pull 3, 4, 5, 10 ingredients out of your cake recipe and expect to have the same cake. You can't do that with the human body either. You can't block a huge chunk of the essential nutrients and expect to be healthy. And I wouldn't expect any supplement program to help, not significantly. I wouldn't expect any diet to help, not significantly. Exercise, like I said, don't waste your time doing anything. I don't mean to be rude, but to just forcefully put that point out there. If you're on a statin drug or a proton pump inhibitor, it is almost certain that nothing will help you at all. So you have to make the decision on whether you want to mess with your body that way. I certainly wouldn't if it was me.
Thank you for that explanation. And with that, there's a lot of complexity in getting the body in a position where it can heal itself. So if you're curious about head to toe healing, if it's for you, go to our webpage, drkevinreese.com. There's lots of educational videos on there. There's a link to our YouTube page. You can get insights of how people have turned their bodies around. There's a lot of stories on there from other people that are in our membership right now or were in the past and how it might help you. And additionally, if you're just starting out, go ahead and get yourself the red book and the green book, and that will give you a head start on what head to toe healing is all about. And then book a call with us. We would love to talk to you about your individual situation and how we might be able to best help you. I want to pop over and talk to Coach Gingy next. One of the calls that I had recently, well, actually, this happens each week. A lot of times people come to us with a multitude of different conditions, pains, different things like that, and they're going into the regular system, the medical system, and they're getting just afraid because every single time they go in there, it's one more thing, or they take one medication and then it has a host of side effects with it too. How can people get themselves in the right, I guess, if they have to go to that place, how can they get themselves in the right mindset so their blood pressure is not going off the charts when they enter that room or when they're having a discussion with somebody in that industry?
Great question. Um, it's not that complicated, and it's also not always that easy. Because it's one thing to go in there and have them say, well, you have an infection and we want to give you this antibiotic, and she cleared up in a week or so. And it's another thing to walk in that room and say, we're going to have to take out your whatever organ or you're going to die. And so managing those two different stimuli will take different mental resources, we'll say. And so we do see a lot of people come in and they have to navigate all of these medical questions with these medical professionals. And the thing that I always recommend to everybody is to think about it more like you're going in to see if this person can help you. And if they say, we can help you by giving you this in so many words, then that's what you need to hear. For example, if I were to walk into a doctor's office and they were to tell me that I'm terminal, I would take that as I don't have anything to help you, basically. Instead of thinking I'm actually going to die, I wouldn't take that belief on. Not yet. Maybe if I saw 5 or 10 people, I might start to think that way. But if I went and saw 1 or 2 or 3, I'd be like, okay, all I found is 1 or 2 or 3 people that don't have the answer. So I'm going to keep going around and looking until I find the answer. And that leads us to the other very common situation that I find a lot of people that call in or join the membership, the state that they're in is they've done this and they've gone to so many people and they can't tell whether or not this person's a scam or this person's legitimate, or they tried everything under the sun and nothing's helped them and they're just burnt out and skeptical and jaded, to be frank. And for those people, I would say that hope is the number one deficiency in their mindset that needs to be increased to some degree, even if it's just a little bit. Because that hope will have them stay committed and stay progressing towards an actual solution. Because there are no insolvable problems in the world. We think there are not. We think there are some insolvable problems sometimes, but it's just a fallacy. If there's a problem, there's a solution. It's just like if there's an up, there's a down. There's an inside, there's an outside. This is the nature of our reality. And if you've tried all of the other things that you think are solutions and that haven't solved your problem, keep looking. You can come join our program and see if the answer for you lies in here. You can go try so-and-so's herbal thing. You can try the carnivore diet. You can try all of these things that you find on the internet. There's a vast majority of ideas in the marketplace. And that's ultimately what you're doing. You're subscribing to somebody's idea. So find an idea that at least is tied to a belief that that person can solve your problem, and then make sure that you're not believing anybody that says it can't be solved. Because with the placebo effect, if you believe it can't be solved, You might as well not even try. I forget, there was an old saying that's like, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. And I would say the same thing exists in this situation.
Very true. Good point. Thank you for that. Coach Ryan, question for you. Diane's here in the chat and she says, what about excessive hair loss daily? Is it menopause? Is there any help besides minoxidil?
Well, minoxidil does not solve the problem. You don't have a drug deficiency. Most likely she has a thyroid problem, which we have talked about in the past. It's a lot more complicated than hypertension, to be honest. But still, almost all of the members that come in have some kind of a thyroid problem. Maybe I shouldn't say almost all, but like the vast majority, thyroid problem is to me, the underlying problem and the most undiagnosed problem. Most of the time, they're not diagnosed with it, although many are. But yeah, that would be the first place that I would look. And once again, as with everything, we would make sure digestion's working correctly. We would use all 90 essential nutrients as a baseline and boost some of them to support thyroid function. And there are some other options in there. We do have a pretty elaborate thyroid protocol in there, but it's got nothing to do with minoxidil or any other cream or drug. They all have limited effects and they all have side effects. And it's not caused by a drug deficiency in the first place. So it can't possibly correct the underlying problem.
Thank you for that. Coach Sean, Denise is asking, how do you do posture therapy? I don't know if you can necessarily explain it in just a couple of minutes or not.
I mean, it's just we give you specific exercises that are meant to simulate certain actions that you would do and help strengthen the muscles that help that function. And so that's the best way I could describe it. Yeah, you're just basically rolling on the floor and then you get better.
I find too, there's simple, easy movements that anybody from age 2 up to 100 can do.
Right.
And it's incredible because the muscles move the bones where they need to go. And so if you've had impingements in your spine or a shoulder higher than the other, or hip hike, I had all of those things when I first found Dr. Reese almost 3 years ago. And I was starting to get the hump on the back of my upper back. And I was having so many headaches and upper shoulder and back pains. And just after a short period of time, just within maybe over 2 months or so, my body started feeling amazing. And those aches and pains went away. And it was all with the 3 modalities: musculoskeletal support, nutrition, and mindfulness training. So if that intrigues you at all, go to drkevinreese.com. We have a start page there. We have educational materials. You can explore the books. If you want to explore the books, start with the red and green one first. That's best. But another couple questions here we have. Coach Ryan, what do you think about frequency medicine using terahertz energy?
I'm a huge fan of frequency therapies in general. And I think not only are they important now, but they're going to continue to get more and more important as EMF continues to be a rising problem. I consider EMF one of the largest problems out there right now. And unlike every other problem, it's the one that's getting massively, dramatically worse year over year. And it's also the one that people are doing willingly, right? Nobody's spraying pesticides in their living room, right? Nobody's going out of their way to expose themselves to industrial chemicals and so on. But people are willingly exposing themselves to increasing levels of EMF. And the vast majority of the health world, including the alternative health world, is not saying anything about it. And so frequency therapies, we can't go into all of them, but I think it's very promising. I have worked with them for several years, and I promise it's been one of the things that have given some of the most dramatic results that I've ever seen and some of the fastest results that I've ever seen. Although those results are less impressive these days because there's more EMF these days. So you're still seeing results, but they're just not as miraculous as they used to be. So yeah, if we don't utilize frequency therapies in some form or anti-EMF strategies in some form, there will be many people who actually just will not get healthy. And that number of people will continually increase every single year as long as we keep increasing the EMF and not doing anything about it.
Thank you for that. A couple other questions we have here. Regina's asking, what about glaucoma and ringing in the ears? Ryan, and followed up by Coach Sean.
Well, both of them are pressure problems. If they have both of them at the same time, I'm going to assume that they have osteoporosis of the skull. As the bone density decreases, the bones expand and they pinch the cranial nerves. There's 12 cranial nerves, and you can get different symptoms when any one of them is pinched. I would also assume that person might have an EMF problem as well, because EMF can cause both of those problems. And there's just many nutrients that you need in general for your eyes especially. But given that both of them are appearing together, I would assume osteoporosis of the skull is the root cause, at least from the nutritional perspective.
Thank you. Coach Sean, do you have any additional insights on that? Ringing in the ears. I know we talk about that probably every week.
Yeah. Same thing. It's that above the shoulder symptoms. And so when you have the rounding of the shoulders, when you have the forward head, you're limiting the amount of resources that can go into the head area and how much of the lymphatic stagnation can drain out of the head area. And so it could be one or the other. It could be a buildup of toxicity in the head, or it could be just the lack of oxygen and nutrition able to flow up into the head. And it could be both, honestly. We can never know, because we always address it from the root, and we always just address it like we never knew the symptom in the first place. But with that being said, eyes have the vessels get so small when you go into the eye. And so with all the resources that are lacking and going into the head, then think about how much resources are actually getting to the eye as the vessels get smaller and they break off into smaller and smaller vessels. It's just a lack of resources. You're just not getting what you need to the right area. And if you clear up that blockage, that bottleneck that is happening, you'll feel a lot better. That's what we always hear. We hear people get so much more energy. Some people lose their glasses prescriptions and they don't need it anymore. Some people end up feeling better within like a month or a couple of weeks. It's just depending on the severity, but when you start to correct the issues and just unblock that buildup that's happening in the back of your head or in your neck area, you'll see a lot of symptoms start to disappear. All of those head symptoms stem from something. And it's not always just, oh, it's my head. It could be your neck. It's something to look into.
Thank you for that. That's so helpful. Rhonda's asking, Ryan, I have tremors. Is there anything you can share to help me?
Most likely mineral deficiency. She's probably going to need a lot of minerals. Good thing is that's the core of our nutritional program, is filling in all those different minerals. There could be lots of them involved, but I would say the most likely would be the calcium group. Calcium and its direct cofactors, especially magnesium, boron, strontium, zinc, but mainly calcium, magnesium. A bunch of trace minerals too. I used to have pretty bad tremor. It's gone away. It's gone away for many people. If you're born with your nerves underformed, which I think I was too, which is why it's like 99.9% gone. But if I get dehydrated or overly exhausted, overly excited, the tremor will come back a little bit. And I have seen people who, they were clearly born with it. They've had it forever since they were a little kid. And we've been able to get rid of like 80% of it or something like that. But I'm just saying that if the nervous system is underdeveloped in the first place, then it might not ever go away. But typically we do see at least a major reduction. And many, many people we've seen close to 100% reduction. Like for me on a normal day, steady as a rock, right? But it will come in a little bit. My nervous system was never fully developed. I had birth defects and childhood arthritis and stuff. And so with an overly stressed day or exhaustion, I'll get a little bit of tremor back.
Thank you for sharing. Regina has another question. She was the one that was asking about the glaucoma and ringing in the ears. She says, I'm blind in one eye, and the doctor said I will not get my eyesight back. Is there anything that you could share with that for her with that kind of diagnosis, Ryan? Is there any hope to potentially get the blood vessels in the eyes to open up again to make them function better, get the nutrients there to function better?
Well, I would say, why not try? Right? The doctor is probably completely rational in saying that because they don't have anything in their toolbox that could help you. Drugs don't reverse the problem, right? All they have is drugs, tests, and surgeries. They don't know anything about nutrition. They don't know anything about herbs. They don't know anything about fasting or dieting or anything. So how could they help you beyond drugs, tests, and surgery? The answer is, in the vast majority of cases, they can't. So it's a completely honest answer from them if they say they can't help you. But to say that you're doomed, I mean, no, I would try. And what I would do is examine the actual person, right? What else is going on with them, and look at their other symptoms to determine what category needs to be supported the most. We'd make sure their digestion is working properly, make sure they're on all 90 essential nutrients, and add extra ones in as needed. And, as Dr. Reese says, if you're not born with it, then it's not yours. So if you had a perfectly functioning eye before and you didn't get shot with an arrow or something, it's not a traumatic injury that caused you to be blind, then I have every reason to believe that the body can reverse it. Needs the right raw materials to do so, and we're going to make sure that the rest of your systems, like your digestion, are functioning well enough to absorb and utilize those nutrients.
Thank you. Another question, let's kind of loop back to our original topic, hypertension. Lenore's asking, what is the right number for blood pressure for somebody that's 67 years old?
Well, they keep lowering the number, right? It used to be 140 over 90. Then it was 130. And now, if it's above 120, they'll probably be bugging you about it. So, I mean, just like the cholesterol you asked about earlier, I wouldn't say that you have to be any specific number. Some people naturally are a little bit higher, but if it's obviously high, if it's 180 over 110, I mean, obviously that's high for anybody, but there's a pretty broad range. Some people sit very comfortably in what we would call the low blood pressure range, and they just don't have any symptoms about it. They feel great. If they don't have any symptoms at all, I'm not going to consider it a problem. So I'm saying that some people appear to be perfectly healthy, even though they are either within the low blood pressure range or the high blood pressure range. Not excessively so, but they're within that normal range. So I wouldn't stress too much about it. Even though they keep lowering the bar, we can all see when it's excessively high. And more importantly, I would look at other symptoms that are going on in the body. If there are no other symptoms, but it's just moderately high, I personally wouldn't stress it. But I would still take the 90 essential nutrients. I would still be off the bad foods, and we could monitor it and see if it comes down. It might. That might be their proper baseline.
Thank you for sharing that. So for those of you that are joining in or have more questions, please visit drkevinreese.com. Get the red book, get the green book to start out. If your eyesight is not tip-top and you need to listen to it on Audible, it's available on Audible as well. So that's always a good option for people or people that are on the road traveling. They can listen to it on an airplane ride and get all the information just in a short period of time. Then reach out to us. There is a start page on our website, drkevinreese.com. So if you do want to talk about your particular situation, have more questions, certainly book a call with one of our coaches. We would be happy to talk to you. The calls are free, and that way you can get all your questions answered. Otherwise, we'll see you again here next week, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, next Wednesday, and wish you a wonderful rest of your week. And until next time, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay
Stay
healthy.
healthy.